How close is Florida State to having championship caliber depth? Tom, by the way, before you respond, just so you know, as we were talking about this, if you look at last year before the national championship game, there was an article that I read. I don't remember if it was a USA Today article or wherever it was, but they were comparing the two rosters, and they were talking about who's got more blue chippers. Well, I mean, everybody knows who's got more blue chippers. Yeah. But what they ended up talking about was TCU relied heavily on player development and for players to outperform their prospect pedigree, for lack of a better term, whereas Georgia obviously could fall back, and if you want to use compilation rankings, you want to use rivals rankings, you want to use on threes rankings. The bottom line was Georgia had 15 players who were five-star recruits on the roster. They had, Jalen Carter and 53, Tom, four-star recruits on the roster. So you had 15 5-stars and 53 4-stars compiled in on this. It's insane. It's an abundance of riches. Florida State does not have an abundance of riches. They've moved into a place where they can win the conference, where they can beat anybody on any given day, where their starting 22 is good enough to compete at a high level, maybe even make it really interesting in a game against Georgia in a one-off on a neutral site. Yes, they have that. Championship level depth where they can withstand frontline injuries to key starters, they do not have that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it always depends on the position group. And, even that 2013 title team here in Tallahassee, we'll put quarterback aside. Anybody who loses their starting quarterback is
in trouble.
Is in real trouble. Like, you just don't have to. That Ohio State team that won the first national championship in the playoff is the exception, not the rule. They went through two guys. Cardell Jones is the one that puts them over the top and finishes the job. But in 2013, let's take that Seminoles group. If Jameis goes down, the chances of you winning the national title are greatly diminished. It's a really good football team. But the other places that they did not have championship level depth, in my opinion, but even back then, the offensive line, who was their seventh best offensive lineman?
Yeah, they stayed healthy. They stayed healthy there. You're right.
A problematic player. Linebacker, probably in retrospect as well, did not have championship level depth for the 2013 Seminoles. You might have had another guy, but if like Telvin went down, holy cow, you're in big trouble. This group, this upcoming year, has championship level depth in more places than the program has in a long, long time. In a way, I'd almost argue they have more depth on the offensive line this upcoming season than they did in 2013, which is really strange. Do they have frontline talent the way that 2013 team did? Probably not, but they've got 7 options to 10 options, depending upon how these two camps go in the offensive line. I think they've got the depth necessary at wide receiver now, which is amazing to say given where they were 2 years ago. I think we all agree at running back, they have the depth. That's quite good. But on defense is where you have the issues. Defensive end, they do not have championship quality depth. Linebacker, certainly not. Safety, probably not, unless they go get another transfer. Corner, they don't. So the defense is the problematic side where your frontline guys can get you through and get you to good places. But if you suffer 3 or 4 key injuries on the defensive side of the ball, you got problems. Only defensive tackle, to me, is a place where you're approaching championship level depth because you bring back Fabian Lovett and you have Fisk and now you have Darrell Jackson and you got Farmer and some of those younger guys. You've got, and Malcolm Ray's still in the rotation as well. So you've got a lot of solutions there, but they don't have it top to bottom. Where that championship team for us, which is now 10 years ago, and that's crazy to say, had 1 or 2 position groups that are problematic. This particular team has probably 4 or 5.
Yeah,
problematic.
And I want to make an argument too that, and this is another area where it's evidenced that they're still climbing, and that's fine. That's fine. They just had a winning season for the first time in 5 years. I mean, it's okay that you're not there yet, but when you talk about, and it's a nuanced discussion because when you talk about depth, do you have Power 5 caliber plus players on the 2 deep? In some spots, yes, like you just mentioned, at wide receiver and at defensive line and at running back. Yeah, they do. Are those elite players, though? No. Like Georgia had the luxury of replacing one elite top 2-round pick in the NFL with another one after that one got hurt. Florida State is not there yet. Florida State's got a plus player, we think, in Fisk, but we don't know really what he is at the Power 5 level yet. He's not played at the Power 5 level yet. So is he a good player? We think so. Was he an elite transfer portal get? Yes. Was he a key depth piece? Absolutely. Does he make Florida State better? We both think likely so. We'll have to see him come spring, and it's exciting to come see, get to watch these new guys. Is he an elite player? Is he a 5-star dominant player? Well, I mean, probably not. Not if he ended up at Western Michigan. So that's where it's different. Like, when you watch Ohio State and Georgia and teams like that, a lot of times they'll lose a key player, and it's devastating to lose a game changer.
Yeah.
But the guy they turn to replace him is a 5-star kid that was just waiting his turn. And that's what the Florida State teams of the 90s did. They were ridiculous. I mean, it loaded for bear. It was unfair. It was unfair. I look back now and realize that if you were a fan of another team in this conference, certainly, you hated FSU because FSU would lose their starting running back or their starting right tackle or their starting linebacker. And then, who are they replacing him with? I don't know. A guy who's going to get drafted in the first round. That's championship caliber depth. That's a whole different discussion. Now, I'm always careful about how I present that because I don't want to take away from the fact that Florida State got better in the offseason, Florida State got deeper in the offseason, and Florida State's prepared to make another run, this time at a conference championship. And by definition, if you win this conference and you have a gaudy record with the schedule that has LSU on it and Florida on it, you're likely to be in the college football playoff. Just doesn't mean that you're equipped to win it all because you have the quality of depth necessary if a few guys get hurt in a war of attrition that football is.
Yeah, I think the problem with comparing the 90s to now is just the way the game is played. And Florida State, in terms of what it favors, and now offense is favored in such a way compared to the 90s, it's crazy. Like, what was the race to in those days? I know Florida State hit like 60 or 70 on the regular,
right. Yeah.
But what was the race to? 24, for most teams. Now it's 35. So at least Florida State is in a position where if you do enough defensively, you're going to win most of your games.
Correct.
A lot of your games. And that's what I'm judging this in terms of the path to the playoff and then championship caliber depth. So on defense, if Fabian goes down this year, you feel better about your circumstances unless you have multiple injuries to the defensive interior. But you feel better about your chances to hold up against the run, where they were awful against the run when he didn't play and he wasn't healthy. I don't think they're going to be awful this year. Obviously, at defensive end, they still need to do some work. Bringing in the Edmond kid was good, and verse returning was the whole key to the puzzle there. They need more work at linebacker because if Deloach or Bethune goes down, you've got the same problem you had last year. Unless Blake Nicholson is truly that much of a freak as a true freshman, you've got big problems there. Safety, still need help. Even with Akeem Dent coming back, if he or Shaheem Brown goes down, who the hell's the answer? I don't know. Do you? Nobody does. And corner, you need more development there. Hopefully Surtain can fill in those gaps. But my point is, the whole goal this year for me on defense is if you can hold teams somewhere between 24 to 27 points a game on average when you're playing the better teams, you're going to win those football games. So, and that even would account for a championship level opponent. I think this offense is going to be opponent agnostic when it comes to the production that they can put up. And it's a little bit different than in those days, because in those days it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust a lot more than it is today, which is spread and go.
Well, that's true. When we go through the roster, though, I think you said something that's very true. Florida State is deep enough and talented enough and really, really good on offense, especially with the quarterback that makes it really go. And now they've added these 2 tight ends. And finally, Florida State's going to have a couple of guys that play a key position in Mike Norvell's offense. So they probably expand their ability to be dynamic, obviously, this offseason. I still would argue, though, that the quality of the starters are not up to par with the best teams in the country. They're just not. They are at some positions. Jordan Travis could play anywhere and start anywhere. He could start at Georgia. That's how good Jordan Travis is now after this past year. Jordan Travis could conceivably be a starter at one of those places. And there are a few other guys. I feel like Trey Benson has merged into a guy now that could start anywhere. If he's going to be that guy that we saw in the second half of the season with that size and that speed and that confidence, yeah, he could start anywhere. There aren't a lot of guys I say that about. Verse could. Fabian could start a lot of places, but Fabian Lovett's not elite. Fabian Lovett's a good defensive tackle. He's not an elite defensive tackle. So it's interesting. You really get into these nuanced discussions. It's weird too, because it puts you in a position of having to denigrate guys that are really good football players. And we're just getting into the fine lines.
Well, this is the exercise that we wanted, though. This is the one that we should always be having at Florida State. We weren't allowed to have it because we were just trying to get up on our 2 feet and walk one foot in front of the other.
Yeah.
I like having this conversation. My thing is where I agree with you. If you just look at NFL combine value or coming out of high school value, there is no doubt that Florida State still has a tier to climb up. But in this day and age of the way the game is played and the way offense is valued, it's can you find a way to get to the mid-30s? Because if you can, you're pretty much in every single game. Yeah. And that it would include even a championship setting. With this offense having so many options, if I'm a defensive coordinator who approaches Florida State and says, how do I stop them? What do I need to take away? I'm going to take away X. Well, Florida State now has Y and Z available to them in any game. So you want to take away Jordan's ability to run? He'll throw over your head. You want to take away the deep shot down the field to Johnny Wilson, double him, and play everything underneath? We could do that too, especially now with the tight ends we have. You want to stop the run? Good luck. We'll roll Jordan out. We're going to give him some perimeter RPOs with the passing game. We've got the receivers to go win those battles. It's just, it gets a lot of fun. It's almost like you're taking the inside track and you're cheating around some talent disparity.
Yeah.
But you can do it in this day and age.
Yeah.
And the thing is, could Florida State, the best thing I can argue for Florida State in terms of depth and championship depth this year is last year's injuries in the offensive line. I didn't think that they could suffer 2 injuries to their top 7. They did. They won 9 bordering on 10 games. Is that a different animal than Georgia? Yes, of course it is. But they're getting better at all these positions year over year. So I think they can absorb 3 or 4 key injuries to people not named Jordan Travis and still be in the mix, which is so much better than they were a year or 2 ago.
Yeah, we're equipped to have this conversation on a much sturdier platform than we did a year ago. There's no doubt that Florida State is in a conversation where you have to be more nuanced in the way that you discuss what they're capable of after suffering a few injuries. Whereas in the past, you could just say summarily dismissed.
Yeah.
Florida State is done with the conversation if they lose this, and this guy. That's not true anymore. That's not true anymore. They got enough guys that they can keep winning games and they can win the ACC with a few injuries. It's fun. It's more fun to have the conversation about whether it knocks them out of championship contention as opposed to going 500. There's no doubt this is a much better conversation to have.